Title: The Hollow Guests of the Whitmore Hotel. Hook. Prologue: The Door That Shouldn't Open. They say the Whitmore Hotel never truly empties. You can walk its corridors at midnight, long after the last guest has checked out, and still hear footsteps moving above you. Light, measured steps that stop when you stop and resume when you start again. The cleaning staff refuse to work the night shift anymore. The manager claims it's the pipes, the ventilation, or the city's vibrations. But there's something else in those walls. Something that remembers. Something that waits. Chapter 1. The Return of Thomas Grady. Thomas Grady had never believed in ghosts. At least, not until he inherited one. When the letter arrived, its paper brittle and the ink faded with time, Thomas thought it was a scam. It came from a law firm in Philadelphia, Hollis and Crane, estate executors. They claimed he was the last living descendant of Samuel Whitmore, the 19th century industrialist who built the famous Whitmore Hotel on Pine Street in 1889. For decades, the place had stood as a monument to Gilded Age excess. Velvet drapes, gold leaf ceilings, mirrored ballrooms. Presidents had stayed there, opera singers, oil tycoons, silent film stars. Then came the Depression. The Whitmore's glory sank into rot. Thomas, a 42-year-old architect from Chicago, struggling with alcoholism and divorce, hadn't set foot in Philadelphia since his college days. He'd been looking for a project, something to fix, something to give meaning to his fading life. When he saw the old black-and-white photo of the Whitmore, towering above the city's cobblestone streets like a ghost from another century, he felt a strange pull. He told himself it was business. He didn't yet understand that the hotel had been waiting for him. Chapter 2. The Hotel Breathes. He arrived on a Thursday in October. The city was gray and slick, the kind of day that smelled like wet metal and old leaves. The cab dropped him at the curb before the towering facade of the Whitmore, 7 stories of weather-blackened brick, its once grand sign dangling half-lit above the entrance. Whitmore Hotel, STD 1889. Only half the letters still glowed. He pushed through the revolving doors, which shrieked in protest, and stepped into the lobby. It was like stepping into a mausoleum of another era. Dust thickened the air. The marble floor, cracked and stained, reflected the faint shimmer of a chandelier that swayed slightly, though there was no draft. Behind the long oak reception desk stood a brass bell tarnished with green age. He rang it. Ding! The sound echoed far too long. Then, faintly, a door creaked open from behind the desk. A woman emerged. She was perhaps in her late 50s, with severe gray hair pinned into a bun and a black dress that looked a decade out of date. Her name tag read, Ms. Landry. "You must be Mr. Grady," she said without surprise. "We've been expecting you." Thomas blinked. "Expecting me? I didn't—" "Mr. Hollis called ahead," she said quickly, her tone clipped, almost rehearsed. "You're here to inspect the property for restoration, yes?" He nodded slowly. Her eyes darted to the stairwell behind him, as if to check whether something else was listening. "Best you finish your inspection before nightfall," she added quietly. "Why's that?" Miss Landry hesitated, then gave a thin smile that didn't touch her eyes. The Whitmore sleeps poorly after dark.
Chapter 3. The Guest Ledger. Thomas explored the hotel for hours. Most of the rooms were locked, but a few had already been broken into by squatters or vagrants. He saw graffiti, bird nests, and old wallpaper peeling in curls like ancient skin. In room 217, the floorboards had buckled so badly that the bed frame leaned against the wall like a corpse propped upright. The air smelled of mildew and something faintly sweet, rot, maybe. But when he entered the main ballroom, he stopped breathing. Despite decades of neglect, the room was magnificent. Dusty chandeliers hung like frozen constellations, their crystals catching the gray daylight. The parquet floor stretched vast and silent, the stage still set with the faint outline of a bandstand. In the corner, a grand piano sat half-shrouded beneath a white sheet. He lifted it slightly. The piano keys were yellowed, a few missing. Yet when he pressed one key, it played. Softly, clearly. And then another key pressed itself down, slowly, without his touch. He froze. Plink, plink, plink. A melody. 3 notes. Then silence. He stepped back. The room was still again. He told himself it was air pressure, warped mechanics. He didn't notice the faint shape reflected in the piano's glossy surface. A man in a 19th century tuxedo, standing behind him, smiling faintly. When he turned, the figure was gone. Chapter 4. Room 303. By late afternoon, Thomas had made his way to the 3rd floor. The hallway was lined with faded burgundy carpet and brass sconces that flickered weakly. Each door had a number in ornate script. Most were unremarkable, until he reached room 303. Its door stood slightly ajar. He nudged it open. The room was small but oddly preserved, the wallpaper intact, the air faintly perfumed as if someone had left moments ago. On the nightstand sat an old guest ledger, its pages yellowed. He opened it. The names were written in elegant cursive. Mr. and Mrs. Harlan, 1911. Miss Beatrice Cole, 1912. Mr. Nathaniel Crane, 1913. Then his eyes stopped. Thomas Grady, 2023. He froze. It was written in fresh ink. He ran his finger over it. Still wet. The door slammed behind him. Chapter 5. The Whisper Beneath the Floor. He spun around. The room was empty. Then came the faintest sound, whispering. He dropped to his knees, pressing his ear to the wooden floorboards. The whisper grew clearer, not one voice, but many, murmuring beneath him, as though dozens of people were speaking from under the floor. He couldn't make out words, only fragments of stay, belong, remember. Suddenly the temperature plummeted, his breath fogged. The floorboards trembled, once, twice, then something knocked from below, hard. Knock, knock, knock. He scrambled back, heart pounding. The whispering stopped. When he dared to look again, he noticed a small brass plaque kneeled near the baseboard. It read, "In memory of Miss Beatrice Cole, 1890 to 1912, found beneath this room." Chapter 6. The Story of Beatrice Cole. That night, Thomas checked into a nearby motel. He couldn't bring himself to sleep inside the Whitmore after dark, not yet. He spent hours researching old archives online, and what he found twisted his stomach cold. Beatrice Cole had been a lounge singer at the Whitmore during its heyday, beautiful, young, adored by patrons. But in 1912, she vanished after a private performance for Samuel Whitmore himself. A week later, her body was discovered, sealed beneath the floorboards of room 303. Whitmore claimed ignorance, but rumors swirled that he'd been obsessed with her, and when she rejected him, he'd murdered her in a fit of rage. The hotel fell into scandal, and though Whitmore died the following year, whispers of his crimes and the haunting that followed never left. Thomas stared at the screen, the cursor blinking beside Beatrice's faded photograph, a pale young woman with haunting eyes. He whispered aloud, "What do you want from me?" From somewhere behind him, faint and unmistakable, a woman's voice replied, "You came back." Chapter 7. The Hall of Portraits. By morning, Thomas's curiosity outweighed his fear. He returned to the Whitmore. Miss Laundrie wasn't there, no sign of anyone. The front door had been unlocked, though he was certain he had locked it the night before. He climbed to the 5th floor, where the executive suites once housed the elite. The hallway was lined with portraits. The Whitmore family, their painted eyes following him as he walked. He paused at one, a man with steel-gray hair, cold eyes, and a faint smug smile. The nameplate read, Samuel Whitmore, 1854 to 1913. The moment he read it, the overhead light flickered. He could have sworn the painted smile widened. Chapter 8. The Blood in the Elevator Shaft. Later that afternoon, he found the old service elevator. It hadn't worked in decades, but when he pried open the rusted gate, he saw something glistening at the bottom of the dark shaft. He shone his flashlight down. A smear of dark, reddish residue clung to the metal rails, too fresh to be rust. And there, at the bottom, half hidden in debris, was a shoe. A woman's shoe. White satin. Beatrice's style, he realized with horror from the photo. He nearly dropped the light. The elevator chain rattled above him, violently. Then something screamed up the shaft, a high, inhuman cry that rose and fell like a chorus of agony. He ran. Chapter 9. The Phantom Guests. That night he didn't leave. He needed to understand. He sat in the grand ballroom, flashlight off, in the dark. And then, as the clock struck midnight, the chandeliers lit themselves. Music began to play, faint and distant, from nowhere, the piano, the violins, a waltz. Figures began to appear, translucent, gliding across the floor. Men in tailcoats, women in gowns, dancing in elegant circles. Laughter echoed. Champagne glasses clinked. It was the Whitmore in its prime. He stood frozen as a couple danced past him, the woman's gown brushing his sleeve. He felt it, cold silk. Then the dancers turned, and he saw their faces. They were gray, hollow, their eyes black pits. The music faltered. One by one they stopped dancing and turned toward him. The lights flickered out, and in the darkness, a voice, deep and resonant. "Welcome home, Mr. Grady." Chapter 11. The Truth Beneath the Hotel. The next morning, Thomas woke on the ballroom floor. He had no memory of collapsing. His hands were ice cold. His phone battery was dead. He stumbled toward the stairwell, but stopped. Down the hall, a door stood open that hadn't been before. A small plaque read, "The Mirror Room." Inside, the walls were lined with tall gilt mirrors, floor to ceiling, hundreds of them. Their glass was aged, spotted, warped. In every reflection, Thomas saw himself, but slightly wrong. In one, his eyes were black. In another, blood dripped from his mouth. In another still, a tall, gaunt man stood behind him, smiling. He turned. No one. When he looked back, the mirrors were full of people, crowded, pressed against the glass from the inside. Their mouths moved silently, and then, all at once, they screamed. The mirrors shattered. Chapter 12. The Descent. She led him down to the basement. The air grew damp, colder with each step. The walls were stone, slick with age. At the end of a narrow corridor stood a heavy iron door. Miss Landry handed him a lantern. "Some doors," she whispered, "were never meant to be opened." Then she turned and left him. He hesitated, then unlatched the bolt. The door moaned open, revealing a vast underground chamber. In the center, carved into the earth, was a pit, ringed with bones, hundreds of them. And at the bottom, a black pool, shimmering faintly through there was no light. As he stepped closer, he saw faces forming on its surface, hundreds of them, screaming silently. One of them was Beatrice Cole. "Thomas," she whispered, "you carry his blood." He stumbled back. "Whose blood?" "Whitmore's." The revelation struck like lightning. His inheritance wasn't random. He was a Whitmore, the last of the line, and the hotel had been waiting to claim him. Chapter 13. The Awakening. The walls began to pulse, like veins. The floor trembled. The black pool bubbled, rising, spilling over the edge. From its depths, hands emerged, gray, skeletal, clawing at the air. He turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind him. The lantern went out, and in the darkness, a voice, calm, familiar. "Thomas," said Samuel Whitmore. He turned. The founder stood before him, ghostly yet solid, his suit immaculate, his face serene. "You have returned what was lost. The bloodline completes the circle." Thomas shook his head. "You murdered them, all of them." Whitmore's smile deepened. "They were my guests. I simply ensured they would never check out." He raised his hand. The air shimmered. The ghosts around the pit screamed, their forms twisting toward Thomas. "Now," Whitmore said softly, "the hotel needs its new keeper." Chapter 14. The Last Check-in. A week later, the Whitmore reopened. No fanfare, no announcement, just the lights turning on one night, one by one. The marquee glowed again, fully this time. The Whitmore Hotel, established in 1889. Miss Landry greeted a pair of tourists the next morning. "Yes, sir," she said politely. "We're under new management." She handed them a heavy brass key, number 303, engraved in the handle. As they ascended the stairs, a man stood behind the desk, straightening his tie. Tall, pale, eyes hollow. Thomas Grady. He smiled faintly. "Welcome to the Whitmore. Enjoy your stay." From somewhere deep beneath the floor, faint and rhythmic, knock, knock, knock. The sound of the walls remembering, the hotel breathing, the guests never leaving.